Hello, I'm Toycat, and you don't need to know a lot about investing to know that now is a bad time to do it. Don't invest right now because there is an economic downturn happening. Let's not forget the recession fears that are just over the horizon. Equities are set to fade away, and if you open up any news headline, you'll see more reasons why now is just a really bad time to be involved in that whole economy thing. Dock workers striking, over 50s turning to house shares, cost of renting crisis. There are so many reasons why you should not be investing, or so you might believe, if you are like most people, because that is what causes stock markets to go up and down, fears of recessions and stuff like that, and you don't want to be investing when something is just about to go down. This is a fairly human need and psychological thing. However, I found a really decent article from a wealth of common sense that explains why it's actually not that big of a problem, even if you were to invest at the absolute worst times. I've mentioned before on this channel why investing is such a good idea, and it always comes back to this graph, right? If you just invest a small fixed amount every single month, then that amount will go up drastically because over time, most equities, most indexes, most bonds, most investments that are not bad investments tend to go up because that's how things work. And so even though there are times where those investments go down, the overall trend over a long enough time span is that those investments go up by a huge amount. $100 a month becomes almost $200,000 if you start in 1970. And this is a graph that a lot of people look at and they're like, yeah, let's get into this. But let's wait a little bit. Let's make sure we wait some. And although that is terrible, that is not the right thing to do. That is a terrible idea. Trying to wait to time the market usually doesn't work out because when people are safe and confident about the market, when it's at its peak, and so it's actually most likely to go down. And when people are really unconfident about the market, that's when it's likely to go up. If we look at the recession fears and the declines we're seeing in everything from stocks to even crypto, right now looks like a bad time to buy crypto because it's worth $21,000 and it was just worth $65,000. That is literally 2/3 down. That's $44,000 per Bitcoin down. What the heck? Why? And here's the crazy thing. People were telling you should have bought it when it was at its all-time high. When it was at $65,000, you probably saw a lot of people being like, yeah, buy your crypto. And now that it's at 21,000, people are like, this is a bad time to be getting into it. And it's so interesting because this article is the one that really stuck home with me that like, okay, timing the market sucks, but even if you are thinking to yourself, I'm so bad at this, I don't know when to start this, now is always the best time to do that. And to prove that, this is a fun article called What If You Only Invested at Market Peaks? And it says, meet Bob. Bob is the world's worst market timer. To help you along with this story, because I think it's a really good one, I'm going to show you Bob right here. As you can see, I've got the the art budget for this video was pretty high, but this is Bob. Hopefully you understand him a bit more now, you can relate to him, because he's a real person with a real face, and he's happy, but maybe not for long, am I right? Because you know the crazy thing about Bob is he's the worst market timer. He has this idea that he's going to save $2,000 a year during the first 10 years of his career, then bump it up by $2,000 every single decade until he can retire at age 65. So he's going to invest $4,000 a year during the 1980s, $6,000 a year during the 1990s, and then $8,000 a year until he's retired. This is reasonable for most people in a middle-class job, you could say. You can argue about how much or little, but that's something like $150 a month that he's going to try really hard to save in the first 10 years of his career. And here's the thing though, he's not going to invest it in stocks. Again, this graph you're seeing right here is what happens if you invest $100 a month. You don't actually do too much besides inflation adjust it. But this shows you what happens if that's every single month, and it goes up and down and up and down, but the end result is always very good over a long enough time frame. But instead of doing that, Bob is going to make the worst possible timing. So the only time he has his courage is when markets are at their highest. In other words, he only invests at the absolute peaks that the market comes to. And so what does that mean that he does? Well, he invests his money in 1972, and then the market drops 50% in 1973 to 74. And then because of that, he's like, oh, I lost so much money. And so he doesn't pull out his money. He leaves it in there. That is the sane thing to do when there's a crash. However, he decides, I'm not going to invest again. I'm going to leave it in a 0% interest bank account until 1987 because he gets really comfortable about investing. He's saved 15 years worth of his $2,000/$4,000 a month, and he throws it into an index fund. And what happens? The market crashes because there is a crash roughly every decade. And so he doesn't know this though. He thinks 1987, that crash has really wiped wipe me out. I'm never going to do this again until the end of 1999. He thinks this is a great time. This dot-com bubble is going to last forever. And you know what happened? He made a huge purchase of $68,000 with the savings from that time. And there was a 50+% downturn that lasted until 2002. Then in 2007, he decides now the world is great. There is never going to be an economic crisis again. We've ended the boom and bust cycle, perhaps you could say. And so he decides to invest, and you know what? Let's just show you the graph right here. Basically, if you only invested at the 4 worst crashes off the last 4 decades, because every decade or so there is a massive crash, then you would lose a lot of money. Your $6,000 would turn into $3,000 months after buying it. Your $46,000 would turn into $30,000 months after buying it. Your $68,000 would be worth $34,000, and your $64,000 would be worth $30-ish thousand. You would lose so much money from the money that you invested just after it. However, here's the thing. Even though it sounds like this is the worst thing in the world, investing $184,000 and losing half of that money that you invest just a little bit afterwards, if you don't then sell after a crash, here's the interesting thing. Even though he only bought at the top of the market, Bob still ended up a millionaire with $1.1 million. How could that be, you might ask? How could this guy, which if we're being honest, he looks a little bit less smart in the head. He's got a little bit of an inbred nose, right? And so, like, he makes really bad decisions. Should I be implying that you have to be inbred to make bad investment decisions? That's probably not true. So this guy is very unhappy, but he did the one crucial thing, and he didn't pull his money out of the market. And that means that because he planned his savings in advance, because he allowed his investments to compound through the decades by never selling out of the market for his 40 years of investing, it meant that even though he would have lost 48% in the subsequent crash, the big bull run between 1972 and 87 meant he was still gaining all of that, and even though there was a 34% crash after that, it was still massively above its 1972 peak. Same with 1999, same with 2007, and yeah, if you, as a result, there is this thing that even though you can be the world's worst market planner, and although you shouldn't have a portfolio that is 100% stocks of just one market, be that the S&P 500, be that your local stock market, be that Bitcoin of all things, the truth is, even though there are big market crashes, again, if you bought in at the peak at $15,000, you'd fit off Bitcoin. This is just a super volatile asset that everyone knows about. It's the, you know, crypto seems to be stocks, but for young people who are not so concerned about losing a lot of money, and that's perfectly cool, right? So if you bought in at $19,000, you would feel like an idiot when that $19,000 became $3,000. But if you don't sell it, then eventually your $19,000 becomes worth $50,000, becomes worth $30, becomes worth $60. Becomes worth 22. When you buy over here, although it takes a while to recover in the inevitable crash, because it seems as though basically every financial product has a crash cycle, most financial products, and again, make sure it's at the very, if you make sure it's a generic one, if it's just some form of widespread bond or equity, or as long as it's not something really sketchy that a guy is being paid way too heavily to tell you about, it'll probably rise in the long run. And yeah, as a result, pretty much no matter when you sell, as long as you make it past 2020, even buying at the worst time in 2017 is going to be fine. The same is true for every stock. If you invest just $184,000, doing it at the worst point in times will make you $1.1 million. Doing it at the best points in time probably makes you a lot closer to, you know, like $1.6, $1.7 million. We could do the exact maths if we wanted to. Actually, we can. So yeah, you just take this and then you add a whole bunch to it, right? You'd end up with closer to $2 million. That's terrible maths, and ignore the way that's totally not true. But for now, you just get the point that you would make a lot more if you didn't time the market terribly. But what matters is not when you start, it's when you finish. The longer you finish from when you start, the better odds you have of it not really mattering about the peaks and decline in the meantime. And ultimately, if you think about it, the total he invests, does it matter that there was a crash in 1972 if he didn't intend to sell until 2000 and wait, when did he sell? He retires in 2009, is it? Actually, wait, so we can work this out. 43 years from 1970. So he retires in 2013 with $1.1 million, right? $1.1 million in 2013. If you're retiring in 2013, it doesn't matter about these crashes. It just matters when 2013 is. And probably to a lesser extent the years just before and just after, because you might hold on. If you're not selling your crypto, I really shouldn't pick Bitcoin for this. I should have picked gold or silver, some weird commodity, just to prove my point that I'm not like a stocks evangelist. I'm a invest your money in something that is doing something evangelist. Let's pick like the worst invest. Look, if you invest in some Dogecoin, you know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have Dogecoin. That I mined in 2013 or something. If you invested in Dogecoin in 2017 at 0.8 cents a coin, then you would feel silly when it became worth 0.2 cents a coin, but then it became temporarily worth for a bit there 58 cents, and so did it matter? Even now that it's crashed from 58 down to 8 cents, when you buy at 0.8 cents, you're still looking like a genius when you sell at 8. And so yeah, all that matters is that you hold for a long time and that you continuously invest, and ideally that you have a diversified portfolio. Like having Doge or having Bitcoin maybe can be 5 or 10% of something. Having stocks is maybe a good idea to have as a big percentage. Maybe have some bonds. Maybe have some of, you know, like, because right now, even though equities are fading, bonds are strengthening. They're really a bad investment for most reasons most of the time. But bonds, the government bonds, that is, where the government pay. You know, when the government borrows money, it's you they're borrowing money from. It's people who buy bonds, etc. Anyway, so like these are the smart things to do. Look at this. Times were really bad in 1974, but then they were really good. And you can't time markets perfectly. All you can do is say, I'm going to be in this the long run, and if you do that, future you is guaranteed to have money. The further in advance you plan, the better off you're going to be, and that is the story you can learn from Bob and his terrible investment decisions. Because truth be told, even though he made every single decision the worst it could be, the real correct decision that he made was just to invest it all. The people who laughed at him and go, ha, you invested before a crash, their $184,000 is worth at best $200,000. They had a high interest bank account. And, you know, in reality, it's probably worth $0 because they probably spent it because humans, and here's the ultimate point, I guess, with this video. Before we go, here's another fun graph, by the way. How long does it take to get to $1 million, depending on how much you invest per month? Ultimately, this starts at $100,000, so kind of cheating. Anyway, so the other interesting thing here is the reason that we have, you know, like this big fear, the reason that markets go down by as much as, you know, what is this, like 15, 16%? This is July and August here. So 16% in 1 month. Wow, that is terrible. The reason that we have these big declines and inclines and everything goes through stuff like this is because of a bunch of effects that basically explain why we treat negative events more than we, you know, like more badly than we treat positive effects, even of the same nature. Again, losing 15% hurts so much more than gaining 15% feels good, and this is because of negativity bias. But we also have something called loss aversion. The reason people buy insurance, which is hoping that a bad event doesn't happen and paying, you're effectively playing roulette wheel, but you're betting on a bad event so that you'll be paid out when that happens, is because we're terrified of bad events more than we like good ones. There's the endowment effect where we really value what we already have. The reason that I make these videos, and I think it's so important to get the message out of like, please just invest. I don't care what you invest in. I really want to make that clear. I have no financial incentives. If I ever get a sponsorship, maybe I will, but I definitely don't right now. I definitely am not even aiming at one. I'm just saying invest in something, and when you have that something, you'll treat it more. Again, this is the endowment effect is one. The reason we have all of these, by the way, because fear of better options and because endowment effects is liking things we have more than things we don't have. We have this like status quo bias, the fear of better options. Who knows what option will be better? And horror vacui, I don't know what that one is. We'll just ignore that for now. The reason we have all of these things, a bias against negativity, a bias against losses, a bias for things we have versus things we don't, and a fear of better options, is because in nature, all of those things make sense. When people, being fearful makes so much more sense than being like, ooh, is this an opportunity? Because in nature, the best that can happen if you go and listen to that rustling sound is you get some food. The worst that can happen is it's a tiger and it kills you. The best that can happen if you, you know, think to yourself like, ooh, I see some smoke in the distance. Maybe it's some friendly people who want to exchange ideas. You know, that's the best that can happen is they're friendly people who exchange ideas. The worst that can happen is they can torture and kill you. The truth is, humans are absolutely filled beyond belief with reasons to fear things more than we trust things. But in the modern world, in the financial world, there's none of that. The financial world is just numbers go in, numbers come out. And that's why, even though it seems like the worst possible time, it always seems like the worst possible time, we are going to live through a market crash in the next few years. If you take my advice and you invest, you're going to lose a lot of money. It's just you're going to gain a lot more money. And that's hard advice to swallow because of all these biases, but maybe you can do it. Is there a reason that this is a woman with long hair that has a picture of herself on a laptop? This is something I really should question, huh? Anyway, yeah, those are the biases. Those are why it's always a bad time to invest. But actually, there's no such thing as a bad time to invest as long as you do it. The most important time to invest is not a specific point in time. It's just consistently. And yeah, maybe you find that useful. Maybe you don't. Third channel. Hope you enjoyed it, because don't care. Goodbye. Wait, I have something to promote. Can you subscribe? Goodbye.